I have a thank you letter from the Salvation Army. So I'm just going to read that. Dear friends, I'm writing to you to let you know that we received your recent gift of $250, which is what we do every quarter. The Salvation Army, Longview Temple Corps, and oh wow, this is not working. The letter doesn't read right. They're thanking us anyway. Every day we see people in need right here in Kelso and Longview. Our staff and captains, Derek, Sierra, Dwell, work tirelessly to provide basic needs to those struggling in our community. Because of support from generous friends like you, we can start meeting this need. Your donation funds programs that provide food to the hungry, shelter to the homeless families, rent and utility assistance, youth programs, and much more. Thank you again for your generosity and your valued friendship. Together we can make a real difference in people's lives. Sincerely, Sarah Besinski, Director of Development. So just want to let you know we are appreciated. And now, drum roll, past President Pat Palmer has words to say.
So I just want you to know that it makes me feel so warm inside. The way you can't wait to hear me introduce our guest speaker today. Many of you know Peter Bennett. He's been here a time or two before. One of the vice presidents down at Millennium Bulk, one of the most important and necessary things, I believe, to hit our community in a lot of years, maybe in all of the 25 years I've been here. Truly, what Millennium has promised to do, they've been doing and will continue to do so much more. Peter, I like to let people know that when I see you each time, I go, this truly is Longview's most important import right here. Help me welcome Peter Bennett, Millennium Bulk.
No, I think I've got a loud voice, so probably we'll get it through. Well, thank you for inviting me, even if the invite did come about 11:15. But I noticed that when we're not on the actual agenda, more people come to the meeting. So I think I may learn something about that. But I think it is. We were appreciative of being asked because we have been in the newspaper quite a lot the last couple of weeks. So I'm going to take just 10 minutes to give you an update on what's been happening with us, and then I'd like to throw it open for any questions or protest demonstrations, whatever you want to do. So the big item for us, of course, is the issuance of the final EIS, Environmental Impact Statement, by the state. As some of you may know, our permits went in 5 years, 2 months and 23 days ago. So this is not a sprint, it's a marathon, a very long marathon. And I'm a very optimistic person. So let's start on the half-full portions of the EIS. It's issued, it's out there, it's the final one, it's done. It is a complete document, all 11,000 pages of it. I don't think anybody's going to go in and say, oh, by the way, you forgot to study this, let's go back and spend another couple of years looking at that. So it's a final document. The document is sufficient for us to apply for permits, and that's huge. I wish I could say that you apply for permits and then go out and hire people and start digging up, but we will apply for permits and then some people will run around to the courthouse and start suing us. But at least it's one stage on the way there. This 11,000-page document said that there are no impacts from Millennium's planned operation that are a problem for Longview. In other words, everything that we're building and doing will be acceptable, and hopefully, finally, it's laid to rest that issue of coal dust being an issue out there. One of the interesting things that we often talk about with the coal dust is your ex-member and our ex-president, Ken Miller, had a meeting with Inslee before he was elected. And Inslee volunteered to him, this coal dust thing is like a non-event. Yeah. Well, they've still been challenging it up to last week. But finally, this document says there is no coal dust issue. So that's the half-full stuff.
Yay!
So on the half-empty stuff, there were some bad things in it. The document still contains this requirement that Millennium mitigate for the greenhouse gas impacts of the product that's run through. They even increased that required mitigation. They were asking for 50% of the mitigation. We challenged them on the way they'd done those calculations. So when they redid the calculations and realized that their math was a little bit off and it was about half of what they were projecting, they doubled the requirement to mitigate. So it's ridiculous. I mean, if you sell a truck made in Washington State, you don't tell them, well, that truck over its life is going to burn so many tons of diesel fuel and you need to mitigate for that. You don't go to Boeing and say every plane that you sell, you're going to have to mitigate for the greenhouse gas impacts of the fuel burnt in that over its lifetime. So why are they coming and telling Millennium, you've got to mitigate for the coal that gets burnt that's shipped through you? It's not the coal. We do not own it. We are just handling it. And our attorneys tell us that the state had no right to do that in the first place. We have a very good case to challenge them on that, but it's still hanging in there. The other bad news item was a surprise to us, and that was the allegation that the diesel impact of the trains that are coming into Millennium will pose an unacceptable increased cancer risk in the neighborhoods adjoining the lines. That was such a serious allegation that Burlington Northern, who actually run the trains, have immediately not only issued some information, which I can forward to any of you that are interested, they actually went and filed a lawsuit against the state for the EIS, because they realized that if that was just left hanging out there, that could impact them everywhere. So an additional 8 trains running in and out of Millennium is going to pose an unacceptable increased risk of cancer. I was meeting with the executive director of the Washington Public Ports Association. My wife and I have a condo in Tacoma right on top of the main line that runs through Tacoma. We have 70 trains a day going underneath us. So the guy from the Washington Public Ports suggested to us we better not be making any long-term plans. We even found something, and again, when you've got an 11,000-page document, it takes you a little bit of time to get through it. Didn't take the Secretary of the Department of Ecology that long to read it, because it was issued at 9 o'clock, and at 9:15, she was sending out tweets about the unacceptable increased risk of cancer. So we're not exactly dealing with a fair playing field here. One of the things that we believe, and Burlington Northern believes, may be a fatal flaw in their argument, is that the calculation that they've used appears to be for a stationary source of the diesel particulate. It also relies on a lifetime exposure, which would mean, therefore, that the train would have to be stationary outside your window, and you would have to live in that room next to the window for 70 years for you to get that increased risk of 10 cases of cancer per million. It's not going to happen. So I think that we're going to see what goes through. Perhaps it's just a reflection that, some people just do not want our project to go through. However, move on to the other points I just wrote down. As you may be aware, we don't just get permits from the county and the state. We also need federal permits because we'll be operating in the water. So those come from the Corps of Engineers under the National Environmental Protection Act. That project is still going along. We think that that document will be issued sometime this summer. That's normally a slightly shorter document than the state one, so perhaps just 8,000 pages, 9,000 pages. But that seems to be going along well. Somebody mentioned to me, asked how the cleanup was going. Yet another thing where you need permits to do cleanup. So some of you actually probably worked at Reynolds and you're aware of what happened there. We are part of this Model Toxic Control Act cleanup. The approved project is a $28 million cleanup. I wish I could say that was going to generate $28 million of family wage income in here. By the time the consultants and the lawyers and the engineers take their cut, we'll probably just have a crew of about 10 people with some earth movers moving stuff around. But we can't even start on that because they're still working on that. That process has been going on for a long time. Although when I get disappointed and complain, somebody says, just look at our stormwater permit that we applied for issuance of a new stormwater permit in 1985, and we still don't have that. So everything works a little bit slowly on our side. I actually when I was hired 5 years ago by Millennium, I was hired as the non-coal guy. I'm supposed to be developing the rest of the site, and we have had a few movements in the right direction. We've got a little startup company working in one of our buildings that's making scientific plastic bags for air testing. It's great to just see a startup company able to come to us and get some cheap rent and start building a business. That's exciting. We cleaned up the warehouse, and those of you that frequent Walmart, if you've noticed, the Walmart is a little bit tidier and improved. You can thank us because they used our warehouse when they were doing that improvement. They borrowed it or they rented it for 3 months, and they brought in the old shelving and replaced it with the new shelving. A company the other day announced that they've been talking to us about a renewable diesel project. We're excited about that. And as everybody knows, I speak to anybody and everybody, so we've been speaking to people about wood chips, and you name the commodity, I speak to them about it. I think we may have one of the Northwest Motor Service come in and use one of our buildings for some of their larger activities while their building's being completed. One of the things that we're proudest of at Millennium is the crew that works there and our relationship with them and how they follow just the safety and environmental standards that are unbelievable. And we were really excited last week when the Chamber gave out their education awards. Millennium got named as the Workforce Education Best Practice Company. I think you have Gina as one of your club members, so you know that she was largely responsible. A lot of her involvement on the educational approach. We work very closely. I heard about LCC during one of your Happy Buck areas. We love LCC. LCC are just fabulous to work with. They do their commercial driving license training on our site. We let them use one of our parking lots, and they keep one of their things. And then when we're actually taking some of our crew and getting them their commercial driver's license. So we have a sort of a barter. We let them use our site, and then we'll stick one of our workers in the cab with them and have him learn. So we just got one of them just completed his commercial driver's license. We also have an electrician who completed an apprenticeship through LCC. So we're excited to see those sort of things developing. And the last thing I would just mention, I was told not to talk about that other service club that I'm connected with.
Probably not.
But Millennium is very involved. It's a wonderful company to allow the employees to get involved. And just as Gina gets involved in the Lions, I get involved in the Rotary Club. We've been involved in that neighborhood resource council. We are very involved in chamber activities, and it's Millennium. I worked for 30 years in the shipping business before joining Millennium. I was never anticipating, living in a small town. My wife grew up in Olympia, Washington. She kept on saying, we should move to a small town, somewhere like Olympia. And then I came here, and small town life is wonderful. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I've already threatened Bob that if they're too tough, I'm going to come to the next Port Commission meeting and hassle him. So bear that in mind, but we have a question.
The traffic situation there at the base of
The bridge.
Pioneer Bridge there and all. Now, when will this start?
So one of the things that we have no relationship with that Oregon Way, Industrial Way project. That is outside of that. When we did our study, we made sure that it didn't rely on what was going to happen there, because we want to show that we stand. The main mitigation that we're going to do with respect to traffic is the fact that we are building 12 miles of rail line on our site. And we will be sucking those trains off the main line. The BN's going to increase the speed of the Reynolds lead up to Class 2, which has a top speed of 25 and an average of 20. So those trains will be coming through Longview at 20 miles an hour, automated crossings. If you're unlucky enough to come as the train arrives and that barrier comes down, yes, you're going to be waiting 5 minutes for that train to go by. But go and speak to anybody who lives in Portland or Seattle or Tacoma and say, your commute may have a 5-minute delay, and they think they died and gone to heaven. So yes, there will be delays from the trains. Absolutely, there will be delays of the trains. We hope that you consider that's an acceptable trade-off for the jobs that we'll be providing. That's really what we're talking about. Did that answer?
Couple over here.
What is the average length of those trains?
About 1.25 miles. It's 125 cars. Yes, please. Yeah, I mean, obviously that is part of the requirement. Those are the mitigations that are written into the study of how we have to have those consultations. We will be working, with the fire department and with the police department to come up with those different scenarios. As you're well aware, that there are trains going through those tracks right now. There are delays right now. The good news is that with more traffic, there will be a more robust plan to work with that. We are living in the world of technology. It should be possible to know when trains are arriving, departing, and making sure that you're not sending down an emergency vehicle that's going to coincide when that train's coming through. When you speak to the railroad, they have procedures themselves that in the event of a train breakdown, they have requirements of how they brake the cars and make sure that they're not blocking crossings. Yes, sir.
Since the BIS is final, what are your procedures for getting some of those things fixed? Not what they're requiring, but the things that are wrong with the report itself. I know the railroad is part of it, and they're going to sue, but where's your guys?
So we're reading through the report and seeing what areas we actually need to address and what areas it's just smarter to accept and move on. With respect to the greenhouse gas, it does look that their new calculations look at making that impact as we get closer to full build out. So the initial build out, the initial 25 million tons, may be under the threshold where any mitigation is required. With respect to the diesel emissions, that's really not our fight. You know, that's Burlington Northern that's addressing that. They're bringing those commodities in.
Is there a way to get them to change the greenhouse?
The greenhouse gas, I'm sure that there's a lot of attorneys who are planning on paying their kids and their grandkids through college based on that fight. But I don't think, you know, the state had the right to study it because they have the right to study anything. They didn't have the right to make it a condition. So they've exceeded their jurisdiction by putting in that. It's not, so we're going to see what happens. I mean, we're still talking to the state to say, you know, perhaps you need to come up with a different idea. We're willing to pay mitigation for our operation. We are absolutely willing to do what needs to happen, the impacts on site. But what we have told the state is if we're paying for mitigation for something that we're doing in Longview, we want to pay that mitigation to Longview. If we're going to cause that 5-minute delay because you can't cross, we want you to be looking and saying, yeah, but they are paying the mitigation right here. The original draft had us buying carbon credits in California or Canada. That's unacceptable. You know, we don't want to spend our money in California or Canada. If we have to spend our money, we want to spend it right here in Cowlitz County.
Two more.
Oh, you need
we
to
got
throw
about
me
a
out?
minute. No.
I just want to know how many pages have you personally read?
I was in charge. I am the B team. I do everything else that nobody else can do. So I spent all of Friday running those red line, taking 2 PDF copies and converting them to Word and then running a red line document between the two, which is fascinating to see how the language changes from one to the other. So
And your degree is in what?
economics.
We do have to move on. One
Okay,
more question.
one more question.
I just read a little article by Stephen Hawking saying if we continue with the greenhouse gases we're going by burning coal and other pollutants, we've got to better be looking for another planet to live on. Nothing against Millennium. I know Montana wants to sell the coal, but where it's going in China, I don't know if it's into China or not, but it's very poor as far as environmental controls. All that coal you send over there and all the CO2 that's going to generate plus the other pollutants are going to come back to us in the air and the water that they pollute.
I'm not going to disagree with you because, as some of you may know, I'm a bleeding heart liberal. I spent 30 years in the shipping industry as the token liberal, and I joined the coal industry as the only liberal. So I am not a climate change disbeliever. What I will tell you is that we are perfectly willing to make the requirement on the coal that comes through our facility that it is within those Paris Accords. Our coal will not be going to China. It's going to Korea, Taiwan, and Japan. And those countries have signed on to the Paris Accords, and they have to comply with it. And they have to take this coal that will come through here and make sure that that stays within those limits. I'm more than happy afterwards to talk to you about climate change. They were very concerned when I was hired that could I work with coal. A lot of my friends have no coal signs in their front yard, so I understand the issue.
Peter, thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
And thank you for coming at the last minute. And I bet you have one of these mugs, but we'd love to give you another one, then you'll have at least a set of two.
Collector's item.
And a membership app, just in case you don't like where you're at. Wednesday, site and hearing meeting, 6:30 PM at the Canterbury Park. Also, Greg has forms if you would be considering being a driver for CAP. Next Tuesday luncheon is our Scholarship Awards Day, so hope you can be here for that. And Melvin Jones fellow meet right over here after the meeting. Judy Fromdahl for tickets for installation dinner. She's right here. Maybe you'll hang around for a couple minutes. Okay. Go Forth Buttons with Dolly over here. Orientation meeting next Wednesday, May 24th. And that will be at the Lions Shop at 6 o'clock. New members and sponsors and anyone else who loves to sit in on those meetings, they're always good. Also, I mentioned the LCC volunteers. If you are a volunteer and want a t-shirt, please come and see me after the meeting. Zone Chair Doug announced that Lions Shelter on Thursday morning, 9 a.m. for staining